Yeah, I guess I come from a pretty big family, and we all live probably within a few minutes of each other. In Philly. Philly's already a small. It feels like a small town, but I grew up loving music. Lots of music in the house growing up. Grew up during like the very infancy of hip hop, so like culturally, hairstyles were changing, fashion was changing, breakdancing was in, graffiti culture was in, DJ culture was in, and as a kid, I just wanted to be part of all of it. So I just was like a sponge, absorbing, every little bit of culture I could get.
Yeah, I saw you had your own hip hop group. How did that all come together?
I think back then everybody had like a little rap book, so everybody either wanted to be a rapper or a DJ. And me and a couple of my close friends who I met in ninth grade ended up deciding we wanted to form a rap group, and worked our butts off like every day rehearsing and in these battles and talent shows, that we would have throughout the city. And the culture back then, it was very talent show driven. So you had this band called Square Roots, which ended up becoming like the Roots. You had Boys the Men in the talent shows, Lisa, who became Left Eye from TLC. So it was like Philly was like this very, very culturally rich community, with all of this talent and all of this ambition, just with everybody just trying to get out. So,
Yeah.
that was like our crew coming up.
What groups or acts were you into at the time? I mean, was it like, like Grandmaster Flash and kind of those OG hip hop guys, or like were there different kind of coming up artists that you were like really into at the time?
Yeah, back then, I think like Big Daddy Kane, KRS-One, Eric B. and Rakim. Eric B. and Rakim was the first album I ever bought with my own money, the paid in full album. And so those were like, especially like during 1988, around that time, it was like considered probably like the golden era for hip hop. So you had just so many diverse types of music within hip hop. So on one end you had like NWA that was like super hardcore, and then on the other end you had acts like Heavy D and the Boys and Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince, and then of course everything in between. So it was a lot of music to experiment back then.
So Troy, Pat's more of the music guy, so I'm just learning all this stuff as you guys speak, which is great. So I'll ask about stuff that's maybe a little bit more non-music early on. I'm curious, what was your family life like, and growing up, how was that for you, and what sort of an impact did that make for you as a child, but also later on now as an adult?
Yeah, my childhood was interesting, because I kind of consider myself, and even to this day, where I never really fit into like one group. So I always found myself having to be a little bit of a shapeshifter. So it was like, not nerdy enough for the nerds, not cool enough for the cool kids. So it's like sort of shape shifting. And so I think that sort of shaped my ability to adjust to, different environments and different people. And then, my mom was a single mom, and we didn't have money growing up. Like our family was, very wealthy when it came to like love and closeness, but financially we struggled. So I think me having to hustle to buy my own stuff, because my mom never could buy me like the sneakers that I really wanted, so I had to get like the we called them Bobos, like the sneakers that were like non name brand. And so I got teased going to school. So that put like a little chip on my shoulder where I'm like, okay, I got to go out and mow some lawns and shovel some snow so I could get those sneakers that my mom can't afford to buy me.
Hmm.
And so, and then also, I think the other piece that shaped me, I grew up without, my dad was in prison for all of my childhood, essentially. And so that sort of gap in my life, sort of, from him being very involved in the very beginning, and sort of going away from there, it really sort of put another chip on my shoulder in terms of I have to achieve. I
Mhm.
have to achieve. And so I
Mhm.
think those are the sort of little bits of ingredients that sort of shape me.
That's a really inspirational story when you think about it from the beginning to where you are now, and obviously we'll talk about what happened along the way. What do you think it was for you that allowed you to still have a positive mindset, right? Because those are challenging times, especially for a young kid who's still in the early stages of development, and not having your father present, or not having money to be able to perhaps enjoy the things that some other kids your age were enjoying. Like, kids are pretty smart, they recognize those things, it affects them. But why were you, I don't want to use the word special, but why were you different in the sense that you were able to kind of get out of that?
I give a lot of the credit to my mom, because, like, where she got up and went to work every day. So like that, like, it was no excuses in terms of not working.
Right.
And so even when we had to scrape together money for the bus and things like that or whatever, it was like a means to an end. And I tease my kids now, like, when they complain there's no ketchup. I'm like, we used to have to put water in the ketchup bottle, and, like, you shake it up to get the last little bit out. Or,
Yep.
we ate it.
Did you guys
I
put
was
the water in the soap dispenser too?
absolutely, you
Yeah, I,
stretch
I,
it.
st- I still do that because I'm just like, there's definitely soap down there. It's just not being reached.
I'm telling you, like, it is. You learn how to be resourceful, though, and
Yeah.
so it was never real. It never really felt like the end of the world during my childhood, and so that's the part. I think she did a really good job in terms of making sure that it never felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. And then the other thing, a friend of mine who I met in ninth grade, who's still one of my close friends, one of the first things he said to me was, "Thoughts become things." And he had this whole thing about positive mental attitude. And it's like, I don't know. I'm like, where do you get this from in ninth grade, by the way? But that was so helpful in terms of, like, learning it at that age, because when I saw that positive outcomes would come, from it, it just stayed as a tool in my toolbox.
Mm.
And then right after, shortly after that, I met Will Smith at Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince. And Will is like the ultimate optimist when it comes to those sort of things. And so I think having all of that at that early age, and then seeing guys like Boys II Men go from dudes in a talent show to, like, breaking Elvis Presley records on pop charts, or Lisa moved to Atlanta and you turn on Video Jukebox and all of a sudden she's in this group TLC, is like, anything can happen. Like,
Right.
you really believed anything could happen.
What's interesting? It's like, when you kind of boil it down, you can say, like, at the time there's a lot going on in your neighborhood, right? And, like, there's a lot of, like, action to be around and being, like, in the right place at the right time type of thing. But it sounds like you were also able to attract certain people that had a certain mindset that really contributed to your mindset in a positive way. And so, like, whether it's your friend in ninth grade, or Will, or any of these folks, like, what was that, something that was intentional? Like, or was it just natural that you kind of came across people like this?
I got lucky because I had bad luck doing dumb shit. I got really lucky. The first time I tried to sell drugs, the drugs got stolen. The drugs got stolen. And so I was like a terrible drug dealer on the first and only day. So they
Hey,
never
you
gave me
attracted the
anything
guy
else.
that stole the drugs that didn't lead you down that
No,
path.
I
So
got I got really lucky because, like, and back then, crack penetrated our neighborhood. And
Yeah.
so everybody, was basically kids who you were in your class, all of a sudden they're showing up and they got on Gucci outfits and jewelry. And, all of a sudden 16-year-old guys are driving, $30,000 cars and getting all of the cute girls. So all of a sudden, every guy wants to do that. And then in Philly, it was a gang called JBM that stood for Junior Black Mafia, and their slogan was "Get down or lay down." So it's like if you didn't sell drugs for them, there were consequences. Luckily enough, a lot of those guys in the neighborhood saw potential in me, so they didn't allow me to get into trouble. And I ended up being able to walk through certain neighborhoods that other people weren't able to walk through, and because they knew, like, even though I had friends that were into certain things, I wasn't necessarily built for that. I wasn't built for that.
What was the potential they saw though? Like, was it music related, like your talent for that, or was it just you as a person?
I, I think it was like I always was that enterprising kid in the neighborhood. So I would throw like the house parties at my
Mhm.
friend's house. I would be the kid. I would cut school all the time, by the way. But I would cut school, and sometimes, some days I would go to the library and read a certain book that I got, like that I wanted to read. Certain days we would throw what we call 40 parties, where you just would buy, 40-ounce beers from the store and hang out. So it's like, so I sort of had both elements, but it's like I didn't have that element that if I was put in a situation that I could pull the trigger on somebody, or it just was certain things that I wouldn't be able to face my family if I went all the way with. And I think they saw that. And a lot of those guys knew my family. My grandmother still lives in the same house today. So it's like, every everybody in the neighborhood calls her mama. So it's like they're not going to they don't want to go to mama's house after getting me in trouble too.
Right.
Troy, I hope that one day when you write a book, it's just called Troy Carter: How Not to Sell Drugs, or just like something that people are like, "What the fuck is this book going to be about?"
It
And then
would
they
be a
open it up, and it's
one-page book, How to Sell Drugs. It would be a
that's it.
one-page
That's it.
book
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Like,
Don't.
get it
pamphlet.
stolen, get
Yep.
it sold.
Oh my goodness.
Um, so you mentioned not going to classes often. Did you end up dropping out eventually from high school or college, or what was that trajectory looking like?
I dropped out in 11th grade. So like I was a really good student probably up until like seventh, eighth grade. And then when I went to high school, I just like checked out. I completely lost interest. Really was focused on, like, I love music and loved hanging out with my friends. And I just wasn't engaged. And I ended up in probably 4 or 5 different high schools, and then finally just ended up dropping out. And then my mom, um, she said she had to take me somewhere, and it ended up being the center, this Job Corps center. And next thing you know, I was on a bus headed to Port Deposit, Maryland, and where she said, if you want to do this music thing, you better come home with a piece of paper. And so I ended up getting a GED from Job Corps.
And what was the GED like? I mean, it's not like a focus thing, but like, what did you think you would do after with that? Like, was it something that you're like, I want to just go down the music path, and that's like the only thing for me, or
You know what is like she did it. She ended up. I think it pretty much saved my life. Having to get off the streets, because a lot of, like, one of our close friends, Joe, who me and his brother were really like best friends growing up. Joe got killed, a few weeks after me, being at their house. Cut down with an AK-47. And my younger cousin Daryl, who was 2 years younger than me, first cousin, he ended up getting killed. So it was guys my age dying every day in our
Mhm.
neighborhood. And so she sent me to Job Corps. She sent my brother to the Marines, and my older brother to the Marines, and she sent my younger brother to boarding school. So she got all of us off the streets. And so I wanted to get out as fast as I could. So I took word processing, so I didn't have to learn automotive and like it was like these hardcore like technical skills. And so
Yeah.
word processing was like the easiest thing. So I learned word processing.
Nice. And then you mentioned Will Smith a couple times. When at what point did you end up meeting him? And like I think if I read correctly, you guys got signed by him, like your kind of hip hop group at the time.
Yeah, we ended up going down to his studio, and it was Jazzy Jeff's studio, and we went down there like almost every day just to see if they were going to be in there, so we could audition, and like literally in the cold, in the snow, waiting outside the recording studio. A friend of ours let us in, and that's when we met Will. But I was about 17 years old when I met Will.
And like, what were they? Were there a lot of people like trying to get them to listen to the like demo tapes and stuff at the time, or
Everybody was.
yeah?
Because they were really like Will was the biggest star to make it outside of Philadelphia, and so everybody was trying to get his attention, and this is like at the very beginning of Fresh Prince of Bel Air, so it's like he's becoming a global star at that point, so everybody was trying to, but we just said we were going to keep going down there until somebody let us in.
Hmm.
And then what happened? So they ended up signing you to their label.
Yeah, they ended up. We auditioned. I never forget. Will said, how are you guys getting home?" And we said, "We don't know. We're just gonna hop on the train again." And he said, "Hold up. We'll drop you guys off." And he ended up taking us to my aunt's house, and he rang the doorbell, and he let them know. He said, "Hey, these kids are going to be all right." And they like my family's face were like shocked, that
Yeah.
this guy's standing on the porch or whatever. But it was like it just was a good validation that we weren't doing this in vain. That I was really working hard at it.
What did Will's like? What did that do for you? I mean, obviously it makes you feel good, but did it push you even further?
Yeah, what? He worked us pretty hard in a sense of um, being like he- we would get a word to learn every single day. Like literally, we would have to study the dictionary and like just to help build our vocabularies. It was like it was almost more etiquette and like refining us because like when I say we were rough around the edges, like super rough around our edges. And so I think, more than anything, watching how he operated and conducted business and like really showed up because nobody could outwork the guy. So it's like so that was the most inspiring part. The sad part of the story was, we got dropped from his label just as quick as we got signed to the label, and that gap in between getting dropped and him and his manager James Lassiter bringing me on board to work for them. That was a hard gap to sort of go from, hey, I'm gonna make it, to I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I have no plan B whatsoever. So that adjustment was really hard.
Yeah.
So
What
what?
what did James? Yeah. What did James want you to do at the label? Like, what was your role there?
So, I did everything like from I managed Jazzy Jeff's recording studio, literally carried records for Jeff when he went on the road to do parties and things like that. Um, to work, I was James's assistant, everything from answering phones to running errands, getting cars washed. So I did anything that they needed me to do. And so part of it was, going back to that thing where, they saw some potential, and I think James really didn't. He saw that when I went back to Philly, I kind of defaulted to, just the neighborhood, so and so it's not like I stayed in the music business and or anything like that. I sort of defaulted. And so I think they, he just wanted to find something for me to do.
Mhm.
What did your mom think of all this stuff, like with your early music days?
They thought I was crazy. I think my entire family, but with the exception of my mom's sister, my aunt Val is like she believed in me like crazy in terms of I could do anything. And I think that was like a bit a motivator because no everybody else in my family thought I was nuts, and which I was, and because I just I took everything to the extreme, and it's just part of my personality to this day. But I don't think my family they my grandmother thought I was doing stuff illegal even after we got signed. Because it's like all of a sudden I'm showing up in nice cars and like, my outfits are better or whatever, whatever. And probably until I was like a talent manager. And I think she saw me in like Ebony magazine, which is like the black version of Time. And
Right.
like, so you go into any black household, and, during that time, you would see Ebony magazine and Jet magazine on every table. So you weren't famous until you were in Ebony or Jet. Didn't matter. You could be on the cover of New York Times. You could be on Late Night with whoever. Ebony and Jet made you famous, and that's when she recognized.
Hmm. How long were you working at the label with James and Will, and what ultimately happened with that?
I worked with them off and on, probably for like maybe a period of 4 years, kind of off and on. Probably the final off. James, we call him JL. JL fired me and sent me back to Philly, and so that was like the ultimate motivator. Like when nothing wakes you up like cold concrete. And I
Mhm.
think getting fired from that job was like super humbling.
And how old were you at the time?
I probably was in my early 20s when I got fired from James.
Mm.
Yeah, and I was the man. Like everybody back in Philly, I thought that I was like this huge executive, and while I'm really just answering phones or whatever. But to go back and have to face people that you're sort of starting from square one was like it was as real as it gets.
Yeah. Did you have any idea what you would do? I mean, I know it's a big hit to the ego at the time, and I don't know, like what did you have to do to like pick yourself back up and figure out kind of what was next?
I went through. I remember the first week I got fired. I was in my apartment in North Hollywood, and I could barely get out of bed, sort of thing. And because I really didn't want to go back to Philly, but I didn't have an income or really alternative or network to even stay in LA. So I ended up having to go back, and I was so angry at James because this is a guy from my neighborhood who grew up 6 blocks from us, and I just felt like he turned his back on me, and I took zero responsibility, and I could not see how he could let me go, and and I was a screw up. Like I just, I had 5 side hustles while I was working for them. I was, using the company car service to go see some girl I was dating while I was there. And, at the end of the week, I would, pay back the general manager when I would get my check or whatever. And she snitched on me one day. She got mad at me and she told JL, she was like, just so you know, Troy's been using the company car service. And and honestly, he didn't care about the car service as much as he cared about who he thought I was becoming. And I didn't see any of that at the time. And after I went back to Philly, I connected with, a couple of buddies of mine who were, starting a promotions company and management company. And they needed help sort of formation and organization. And they called on me to do it. And that was sort of my foot back in, and sort of the confidence builder, and just to be able to how do I put it? Some, when you get like, it's almost like getting kicked down. You just need a small little wins just to start rebuilding your confidence. And like, working with those guys, and I started helping out and with Eve, and that sort of, the work that I was putting in around Eve sort of started giving me my confidence back.
How did you end up connecting with Eve?
I met her I met Eve when she was probably 16 or 17. She came and auditioned at a studio that I was in. And she had a rap partner, and she was really good. Her rap partner just had a really stink attitude. And so, it was like, okay, she's good, the other one's not, but sort of forget it. And then we reconnected through the company that I was helping out. And I was having some issues with the company. I ended up parting ways. Then she ended up leaving and parting ways. And she called me up and asked me to help her find a management company. And I started taking her around for meetings. And at the end of the day, she said, "Look, you've done a great job so far. Why don't you just do it?" And that was sort of my first real step into talent management.
And did you start your own company like at that point, or you were still working somewhere else?
It was I started I don't want to go as far as calling it a company, because it would sound much bigger than what it is. It's like, you could go on LegalZoom sort of thing
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like an
Right.
LLC.
right. You
So
had your own LLC here.
I had my own LLC. So
Stands
it
for
was only
limited
me.
liability company. So hey,
Yes,
you can make
yes.
it sound as big as you want.
When you put that on a business card, the LLC, it makes you
Mhm.
sound big time.
Yep.
But it was only me. So it was me and Eve, and I bummed office space from a buddy in New York and a buddy in Philly. So I just would go use his office in New York and use my buddy's office in Philly.
Multi-location company. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
you're like east west everywhere.
Cool.
Not to jump around too much, I think I read there was a time where you met P. Diddy, Sean Combs, and were interning at Bad Boy Records, which I don't know if that was like the heyday of like Bad Boy Records with Notorious B.I.G. and all, but when was that? Was that before meeting Eve or after?
That was before meeting Eve. So I was promoting parties in Philly. That was one of my side hustles, and so I would promote these parties, and I was promoting a Notorious B.I.G. show, which Big never showed up to, and which was my biggest show with like 3,000 people. And I get a call that he was a no-show, and I got on the phone with his manager and his head of his label, which was P. Diddy, and we got into a big fight on the phone, just arguing over it. And it came down to Philly still for my after party, and we ended up connecting. And like, Puff was like the first um, real entrepreneur of my hip hop generation. So like,
Mhm.
Russell Simmons was like the generation before me. P. Diddy was like my generation. And so people idolized this guy. So when we went into the club, this guy's holding court. He has champagne bottles. It's the rap video.
Yeah.
And so, I told him, I said, "Look, man, I want to come work for you. What do I need to do?" And he said, "Get me that girl's number from behind the bar, and that'll be your first job." And I walked over to the bars and got her phone number for Puff, and started working for him right after.
Wow, that's a crazy story. So you meet Eve, and you're managing her, and then I think I saw you eventually started managing Nelly and Flowetry and some other acts too. So were you like kind of just like building up a clientele at the time and just trying to manage a bunch of as many people as you could?
Yeah, well, one of my good friends, Jay Irvin, he's from Philly too. He was managing Flowetry at the time. And so we just decided that we were going to join forces. One of our mutual friends sort of connected us and said, "You guys need to work together." And we just joined forces, and he had one client, I had one client, then we signed clients together and sort of built this talent management company. And it ended up being probably one of the next to Violator Management, which was Chris Lighty's company with 50 Cent and Missy and a bunch LL Cool J. We probably had the second best talent management company in the urban space, and we
Mhm.
ended up building it and then selling that company in 2004.
Got it. So, I mean, would you say that at that point, Troy, you were financially in a great place, or was it still just early days? I mean, and you had to kind of build on from there.
I was hood rich back then. You know, enough for my apartment that was $1,030 a month, and uh, uh, me and my now wife, who's my my who was my girlfriend. I didn't have a car when we met, so I used her car to get around, and we kind of shared a vehicle, and so we were able to get two cars. So that was like as rich,
Yep.
as I got at that
Right.
time. But I started being able to at least um, accumulate a decent income to start, raising a young family.
Yeah.
So, but by no means did I have any real money or anything like
Sure. I'm curious. There's obviously now there's a ton of talent managers. I don't know what the scene was at the time, but it sounds like you kind of fell into it, right? Like it wasn't a planned career choice for you, even though now like there's like programs in college for stuff like this. But what was your purpose, right? Was it just I want to make money because I know what it's like to not have it? Or did you truly enjoy working with these musical talents?
that's the thing. Like I never did anything for money. And even to this day, when I find myself not enjoying what I do, I know it's time for things to change. So I always loved music, and I got into music because I loved it. When I couldn't be an artist anymore, I still wanted to be around music. So I promoted parties. I passed out promo records for Def Jam. I interned for Puffy. I worked for Will and JL. So I just wanted to be around it
Mm-hmm.
and stay in it. If it was up to me, I would have been Drake back then. But it's like
Yeah.
I didn't have I didn't have the talent to take it there. But what I realized was my gift ended up being my ability to build networks and to be able to um, follow up. That
Mm-hmm.
was like my gift back then. And for a young artist, having a manager who could follow up for you and and make cold calls and get you things that you wouldn't have been able to get on your own, that went a long way. So so that was sort of my foundation. But it it I found myself, sort of fast forward, and we could get to this, but one of the reasons why I ended up leaving Spotify was, that was a very high level, cushy position. And I love like Daniel is one of my mentors and friends who I love dearly. But when it felt like a job, then I knew it wasn't feeding my soul and my spirit and my purpose.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, kind of, we'll get to this part too, and kind of like jumping a little bit back. So, you sold the company, the talent management company, in 2004. So, you said, and then I think it was a few years later when you ended up meeting Lady Gaga, right? How did that whole thing come about? What were you doing at the time? And I think I read that she was also kind of looking, or she had been dropped by her label at the time too, and also kind of share some of like what that time was like.
Yeah, I sold the company and realized that I made a big mistake. And because we did the deal basically to make money.
Hmm.
And it was the biggest check that I ever saw at that time. And I'm married by this time. I got a young family by this time, and they wanted me to help open up the LA office, and it gave me a pretty big platform, like for Guns N' Roses, Destiny's Child, like some of the biggest acts in the world were managed by this company. And but I saw early on that it wasn't the right culture fit, and that I was not happy. And so,
how did you assess that? How did you assess that it wasn't the right culture fit?
you know what? A lot of my day to day joy comes from working directly with artists, and like I like being in the rooms when we're discussing music video treatments or marketing plans, or going into the studio to listen to music and them calling me up and playing me song ideas over the phone, and like so all of that stuff is what like feeds me. When I had to start getting into dealing with P&Ls every day, dealing with like, it was a publicly traded company, so I'm dealing with accruals and like all of the, like literally, I felt like I became an accountant. And
Yeah.
so there was this disconnect between me and the artist, and so that part for me felt like okay, this isn't what I'm good at. This isn't what I do. This isn't what you bought the company for. By the way, you want me, out there killing it and signing more clients and all of those things. But it just was a different, and culturally, me and Jay were best friends. My partner,
Mhm.
we're best friends. So we're at dinner every night. We're our kids are growing up together, hanging out, and we're in this corporate environment. So it just was like a fish out of water. So we were able to get out of the deal, and I reinvested in this new company that I was starting, and Eve was gonna, sort of drop this new album, and she decided to move in another direction and hire another manager, which I wasn't prepared for at that time, and
Mhm.
so I ended up getting financially wiped. And this is like going into the recession and 2000, this is like 2006 2007 time, and it ended up becoming so difficult financially, where I couldn't pay any of the rent at the office. I couldn't keep any of the employees that I hired. I ended up having to move out of there, and you know couldn't pay tuitions and taxes and like all of the things that becomes nightmares financially. It was
Yeah.
embarrassing.
Mhm.
It was unexpected, and it was the literally the darkest time of my life, because I went from having everything going for me to nothing's working at all. And so starting over, um, it was a guy named Vincent Herbert who I came up in the business with, who basically brought Gaga to my office as a new artist. He said, I got this girl that I want you to sign. And Will and JL let me use a little cubicle office in their building. And uh, Vincent brought her in, and I'm like, wow, this is a superstar. Like I knew right away.
Can you?
Um,
I mean, so how did you know that? Like, what was it?
so she looked like she landed from another planet. Like, so and one thing with superstars, they suck all of the air out of the room when they walk in. Like, because people want to see like who is that person.
Right.
And so she was very only difference, she was a brunette at that time, but still the fishnet stockings, no pants, like big glasses, all of those things, like all of those elements. And she played a few records. One of those records was Paparazzi, which is was a smash on the demo, and
Right.
and a few other records. And she was super clear about what she wanted, like her articulate and her vision, which you don't hear it that clear from artists all the time. And then the next time he brought her back, um we went to the fanciest restaurant I could afford at that time, which was Spaghetti Warehouse.
Oh,
And
man. That's
She,
rough.
she was Italian, so I'm like, I gotta take I got to take her to an Italian restaurant, and that was literally we went to Spaghetti Warehouse together.
It's a bold move.
Bold move, and
But do you think like was it like I mean obviously having that kind of talent why were I mean maybe there were but were there like a bunch of other people trying to get her to hire them as her manager, or was it just like this talent that you saw that people weren't seeing in her for some reason?
no, like she had gotten dropped from Def Jam, and
Right.
so she had a record deal. She had gotten dropped from Def Jam, and basically had spent the last few months in that same type of dark room that I was in, and so it's hard when you work that hard for something and you finally think you made it, and I could relate to her. And
Mhm.
I just lost everything. I knew what it felt like to get dropped, and like so. And she was like she gave me confidence that I didn't have at that time. Like somebody like really believing in you, like when nobody's believing in you at that particular time, and she's saying, hey, I want you to manage me, and she's like listening to every single thing that I say, like because for her it's like, oh, you did this before, with Eve and some other artists. Maybe you can do this for me. And so she had so much faith in me that I had no choice but to reciprocate it as much as possible, because the gift she was giving me, I had to be able to give that back.
Troy, just to take it a step back, I'm curious, what were some of the lessons learned from that rough time, that dark place that you were in, both personally and also from a business financial standpoint? What did you take out of that?
You know what? Be good to people, because I go out of my way when, like, having come through that, I go out of my way that when people are going through a tough time, to reach out to them. And it was super lonely, and it made me a more empathetic person to other people. Like that was a big deal for me. Like when people who will return your phone call in 20 seconds all of a sudden don't return your phone call anymore. Like, that's real.
Mm.
And so understand and valuing relationships and understanding which relationships are real and which are transactional, that was a real lesson for me. And I'm a big boy with that though. Like, I understand, okay, this is a business relationship, and this that and that was transactional. So don't let your feelings get hurt when
Mm.
if you get let down in that particular situation. The other thing was, really learning about being able to diversify and be and being, you know, that's I'll take that even a step further, because that's not really true. The Like, in hindsight, it was about diversification. In real time, it was, I can't be dependent on people for my livelihood, and because somebody can make a decision that can change the course of your life and your family's life. So it made me really think about, how do I build a business and a life that becomes less reliant on the mood of somebody else or the judgment of somebody else. So that was really important for me, and I think it was pivotal, and how I moved forward from that point.
Yeah, that, I mean, and that's something that I think that is, and that's why I ask, is applicable across every industry, across everyone's life. I mean, you're gonna run into times that are unexpected, and I think that's what it was for you, right? Like, I mean, you wake up one day, you're like, oh, okay, we're gonna build back up, and then nope, Eve's gone, and like that's really it. I mean, I think a lot of people have had an Eve in their life, whether that's a person or a job or a situation, and I think that frankly, if you don't have those, it you kind of get comfortable, right? Like,
You do. With talent management, it's one of the reasons why I stopped doing talent management as well, is because really, really, really good talent managers, like the top, you pour your soul into the work and you become one with that artist, and it's like you literally you live on the road with this person, like you become family. And so is different from a job, that even a job that you could have for 10 years where you work with people, is you actually live with these people and like you become close, super close with their families and everything else. So when you do part ways, you have the business heartbreak and the personal heartbreak sort of mixed into one. And I made a conscious choice of, like, part of, one, I didn't want to be on the road anymore, but part of it too was, just to be honest, was I'm like, I can't take the emotional piece of it, like, because I can't phone it in. I can't. That's not just a business relationship for me. So it's like it's hard, that level of investment. You only can do that level that I did with Eve and Gaga specifically. You only could do that level with a few people over a course of time.
right. And I feel like that's why a lot of talent managers are known for like one or two artists, even though they've managed a bunch. It's because they've literally, for whatever reason, have had to invest their entire lives into it. And I mean, frankly, it doesn't seem like it always turns out, positive for the talent manager at times.
Yeah, I call it one queen per hive. And it's like, so you got that one big artist, and then you sort of have, the rest of your roster, but you dedicate, your time to that artist. And, I think one of the epiphanies for me that, just let me know I wasn't going to do it forever. I went to lunch with Paul McGinnis, who's U2's manager. And Paul was somebody who I would go to for advice, just, Gaga was a rocket ship. And so it wasn't anybody in hip hop that was even close to Gaga, probably with the exception of Eminem in terms of like trajectory. So I had to, think about pop. And so Paul McGinnis became like a mentor, and we were at lunch, and he was telling me how he had never missed a U2 show in like their entire career. And I'm like thinking about all of the U2 shows that
Wow.
that they had done. And Guy Oseary was the same way with Madonna, and still is to this very day. Guy goes to every single show. And I'm like, I have 5 kids now. And at that time I think I had 4 kids at that particular time I was talking to Paul. But I'm like, when I'm with my older 2 kids, I was managing Eve, and I had to sacrifice so much, like, school stuff and, like, all of that stuff, with kids growing up. It's like you want to be there, especially for 2 boys or whatever. And that's, looking back, I'm like, I wasn't there enough in the beginning. I was out hustling, trying to build a career. And our other 2 kids, sort of came, right around, right before I started managing Gaga. And so as Gaga started getting bigger and bigger, and we were getting into like the third album and stuff, I'm looking at things like my son's first soccer game, and we are supposed to do something at the White House. And I'm like, okay, if I'm really good at this, I'll get a chance to go to the White House again, but I will never get my son's first soccer game back. I, I might be okay missing the second or third game, but I will not miss his first soccer game. And that was a conscious choice I made. And so what I started learning was there's going to be trade-offs. It's going to be sometimes that I'm going to miss certain things at home, and it's going to be sometimes that I'm going to miss certain things, with Gaga. And what I saw though, and being completely frank, those sacrifices um, weakened our relationship. It weakened our relationship. Like where we were still close and and cool and everything, but I do think there was some resentment that I wasn't going to be everywhere all the time. You know what I'm saying? And like I had a great team that was out on the road. And honestly, if I had to be at every show, that means somebody's not doing their job. Like,
Mhm.
all of my work goes into all of the lead up on those tours. The first couple of weeks, you're out making sure that everything goes right and according to plan. Once things are up and running, then you got a team that keeps that thing running like a well-oiled machine. And so I think when you got that level of artists, they're expecting you to be there every single day.
Mm. What I mean, it just sounds like an unrealistic expectation, though. I mean, like, do you think that that's something that will eventually change in the music industry?
Nope. I think that there's certain artists who don't need that and don't feel like they need that, and then
Right,
there's other artists who feel like it's justified. Like you make a lot of money. I want you here all the time.
right.
And not to say that was Gaga by any means, but like I've seen that with other artists too.
And I mean,
Yeah. And
go for it, Pat. Sorry.
oh no, go ahead. You were gonna ask something
I
about.
was just gonna say, like, first of all, I'm curious. Did you ever end up going to the White House? Did you ever have another chance?
Quite a few times.
Okay, good, good. Because I'm glad you went to your son's first soccer game, but I was like, I really hope that story ended up with Troy eventually ending up in the White House.
And honestly, it's like it's I told you about my childhood growing
Yeah,
up, and like that's the one thing I just wanted for my kids, like in that like my kids being able to have both parents at home, and a very present dad, like I'm very involved in my kids' lives, like that to me is like that's the ultimate, that's wealth, that's like real wealth.
hmm.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. So I know you and Gaga worked together for about 7 or so years, and throughout that time, if I have my math right, you started Atom Factory, which was kind of another management company that you had managed John Legend and a few other artists and acts as well. And so I guess like what ultimately you mentioned kind of the differences with you and Gaga and things not working out. Kind of what was that time of your life like, when you had kind of different artists you were managing? You mentioned you wanted to get out of talent management at some point. Kind of share a little bit there, and then we can kind of talk about what comes after that.
Yeah, I think the like when Gaga and I parted ways, um, I had done a lot of soul searching in terms of like, what I wanted for my own life. Because, as a manager, you spend your life building somebody else's career and life, and like, like it's almost like the barber whose hair is a mess. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, I got to manage my own life too. And like, I have my own sort of dreams and aspirations. And so, part of it was, this is when ego comes into play. Is like, okay, I gotta show the industry that I still got it, and I can do it without having a Lady Gaga. And from there, I probably had more number one records within that period without her than we had together. And that to me was one of those things that was a bit of a validation that, okay, I can still do this. I can still perform at a very high level as a talent manager. So I had to do that part for myself. The ego part though was I was staying in talent management because everybody expected me to stay in talent management, and I was defined as a talent manager. So it's like, so I started really, um, uh, I felt like I was in it for more than for other people than I was for myself.
Yeah.
And I know it to be true because so many people that were close to me were disappointed that I wasn't a talent manager anymore. And so it was kind of like, oh, this is, you were more identified through this than I was. And so being able to let that go was hard. It was a lot of insecurity involved. Is those days I woke up, sort of like, what did I do? Why did I do this? And but
Right.
is sometimes you got to push.
I was going to say, aside from all the successes, talking about kind of the other side of it, which, which is the failure side of it, which, you can call it a failure or not, but it sounds like there's this like recurring theme with you in your career, which is like, you got dropped by the label, and then you got fired by Lassiter, and then you got, fired by Eve, and then fired by Gaga. Was it just like something that you were like expecting, like it's part of the game? Like it'll just, because it's interesting because, we live in a time now where, especially right now with a lot of these like layoffs at companies or just people getting fired, not knowing, like being scared to get fired or just like feeling very down about it. I want to kind of talk about that because, you've been there so many times. Like, how did you approach it every time? Did it just get easier and easier, or was it just something that, was just like, hey, it's part of the game?
Yeah. So yeah, yes and no. So because, and I think they're different for different reasons. And so it never feels good to get fired, right?
Mhm.
But when you get fired on principles that you stand on, then I'm okay with that. And I feel like, which I won't get into any sort of details or whatever, but in certain circumstances, I've felt very, very, very um, um, I was right in terms of the principles that I stood on,
Mm.
and that's something that just won't change for me. Like, specifically when it comes to management, because in most cases people are going to tell our artists yes to everything. It's like you got a ton of sycophants, and and my job, if somebody says the yes to the wrong thing, you could turn out to be Amy Winehouse or Michael Jackson for that matter.
Right.
Those are people around those people who say yes to everything. And I care about the people I work with too much to allow anything to get in the way of that. And I'm not saying drugs or anything like that, but it could be bad business decisions or whatever else, right? So that part, those, so certain things are different in terms of how I reacted, on a level, whether hurt, frustration, or regret.
Mm.
um the other piece of it though is every artist that I work with, and for the most part, or every job that I had, I probably could have stayed there forever. Like Will still has people who have been with him since he lived in Philly that still works on the team. Like that's like literally it's probably five people that might have like churned, out of the core crew. So and so it's I'm willing to take chances, and I'm willing to push. Sometimes those pushing too hard has gotten me into places where it's like, okay, you push way too hard, and then sometimes it's pushing the boundaries of myself, where it's like I'm gonna challenge myself to start over and not be afraid to start over.
Yeah, I think that's
And
the key of it. is like the fear of it, just like not being afraid to part ways or be fired for something that you believe in or stand for.
Yep. And like for me, I was just telling another entrepreneur a few days ago. She's just started a company recently, and I was saying how she should join like YPO, like Young Presidents Organization, or some sort of support group, because being an entrepreneur is so lonely at times, and because it's a hard path. And so I've had a really good career in terms of, like, when you look at, like, over the history of my career. And to be honest, even with starting the new company that I started, it's times where I'm like, why in the world did I decide to start over again? Like, I have those days, and I have those days where I got to put on something motivational, just to sort of feed my psyche, because
Right.
it could get hard. And so, but the wins are much more rewarding when you win.
Hmm. Yeah. So speaking of what you're up to now, I know. So you were at Spotify for a couple of years. You were the global head of creator services there, and then you ended up leaving, and I believe starting Q&A and Venice Music, which is kind of what you're working on now. So tell us why you decided to do it again. Like, what was kind of itching? What was the itch? What was something that you saw broken in the industry, and um, you know, what's kind of the approach now?
Yes, so I was an early investor in Spotify, and would consult for them on, like, some of the U.S. strategy, as they were coming into the U.S. And so I've become very close with Daniel Ek, the founder. And so I was working on a project with consulting, and this is why I still have my management company. And we ended up turning that went from me consulting to, okay, why don't we make this bigger? And we ended up creating this division called Creator Services, that was sort of the bridge between Spotify and the music industry. So artists, record labels, music producers, songwriters, and I basically helped build out the global team. And it was very entrepreneurial, because it was building a startup within that company.
Mm.
And so it was incredibly rewarding. But what I learned was, I was so used to working with huge superstars, I knew nothing about independent artists, coming
Mhm.
in. And it was like I was wowed by the disparity on every single level. It's like the haves and the have-nots, and the indies rarely had access, because the major labels, they have machines behind them. Essentially, they have a lot of leverage in terms of their catalogs. So they basically designed the system to shut out shut out independent artists. So a lot of what we did over there was figure out ways to equal the playing field. But what I saw was that it was certain things that I couldn't do internally, just because it would piss off the major labels and make it harder for Spotify. And I talked to Daniel about being able to build out distribution externally, and which he became supportive of, and I ended up leaving and building out Q&A in Venice.
So what is your why? Like, with all these things, and, like, what is, or what are some of the values that have been unchanged in your life since day one?
Underdogs, underdogs. So, like, that for me is, through therapy and soul searching, just kind of learning more about myself over the years. Like, you kind of look for yourself in other people sometimes. And so for me, I've always found myself rooting for the underdog. and and like almost like these helping them through the hero's journey. And so even once I started like being sought after as a manager, by having big clients, I always still sign clients from the beginning of their careers. So it's like, so you had other management companies that really focused around signing superstars, and my company was different. We went out and found new artists and developed them and helped them become stars, or found sort of mid-career artists and helped mid-career artists sort of take their careers to the next level. So that's the one thing that I saw, like, that's just sort of been this continuous through line. And I think that's what led me really to the path of independent artists and indie labels, was just kind of seeing them be the underdogs, and like, okay, how can it be us against them? The same thing led me to investing in startups. It was like
Right. Yeah,
a sort of,
you're a seed stage guy.
yes, like it's like that punk rock, early hip hop, us against them, us against the big guy, and going after it.
I'm curious though, just to like play devil's advocate here. Isn't the goal though to have that underdog become the big dog, right? Like,
Yes.
and so how do those values ever, um, you know, cross one another? Where yes, you're trying to support the underdog, and then they become the big dog, and then now it's like fighting this like battle almost.
You don't shit on the underdog once you become the big dog.
Mm.
So it's like, it's so even when you looked at a lot of the tours that we put together with our artists over the years, we always made sure we had developing artists on those tours, or new managers on those tours, or giving choreographers their first shot, or designers their first shot, or video directors their first shot. So it's still many ways you can support underdogs, within that. And it's just this lineage of underdogs that we sort of supported over the years, that have become like, huge in different fields, that they then go and sort of start hiring. So it's almost like this spirit and culture that sort of starts from that seed and builds out from there.
Troy, what is the future of music? And I know this is a super general question, but what does the future of music look like? Right? When Pat and I were growing up and we're both 30, like our parents played cassettes and then, in the car, or they had their folder with, all the CD-ROMs they used to take out and put into and now you're just streaming everything, and it's a lot easier to become an artist. It's a lot easier to have your music shown to the world, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, God knows what other services there are. What's next?
I'm a really big believer in I would say metaverse with a lowercase m,
Hmm.
and what I mean by that is the concert experience is going to be way better than virtually than live at some point. And like for me, I love, like, I'm a sports fan, like, so like American football and basketball are like my two favorites, and I love Formula One.
Eagles
Um,
and the
Eagles and
76ers, I assume.
Sixers, those are my teams. Formula One, I rather watch on TV, just because I can hear what the driver's saying. I can like see the full race. You get all angles, all of those things, right? Same with American football for me, where is a great experience on TV than it is within the stadium. And with concerts, we haven't been able to experience, everything from an immersive experience, sort of what's going on backstage, who's calling camera angles, like it's so many intricacies. And the reality is most seats at concerts are terrible. There's a handful of really good seats at concerts.
Yep.
So to really get to see a show holistically is better from an immersive experience. So I think
Right.
that's going to play a big role. And then also when from an artist standpoint, I think virtual merchandise, virtual concerts, these sort of experiences where you could sort of scale audiences, I think, and capture the revenue from it at the same exact time. That's the part I'm looking forward to because artists, they either leave money on the table or they have a big leaky bucket because everybody is in their pockets.
Hmm.
So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing a lot of those middle transactions cut out and the artists being able to put more in their pockets.
I'm
Yeah.
all
What
about,
about the
sorry, go for it, Pat.
I was just going to say, what about from the standpoint of ownership? Because obviously we're seeing that change too in terms of, artists having more share in, in the publishing rights or whatever it might be.
So I think optionality is the most important thing for me when it comes to artist rights. And so, because you got some artists who are fine, you see a lot of people selling their catalogs now. It's like a regular thing with artists and songwriters and producers selling catalogs. They should have the option to do that. And so everybody doesn't want to own, but they should have the option of whether they want to own or not. And so when I look at, the closest example for me is watching how the NBA evolved over the years and how, at one point it was this owners control league, and then now it's more of a players control league. And you look at the collective bargaining agreement and how, it plays to the players' favor. And then you see a lot of players are saying, okay, I'm not going to take the super max deal right now. I'm gonna do a 2-year contract because I know TV rights are going to make more money in the future. So I'll be able to get a better contract in a couple of years. So they're negotiating for optionality, and that's what I want to see. What more artists do is don't go for the big bags of money up front. Actually, go for whatever is going to give you the most optionality to be able to optimize for wealth or better choices for the future.
Troy, I'm all about artists getting paid, but what's going to happen to the quality of music? Because I feel like, this is strictly an opinion, I do feel like music has not been as great as it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And now I just sound like an old guy. But what's going to happen to the quality when, I don't want to say that all they care about is making money, but when the primary focus really has become, we want to just make money because for years we haven't.
Yeah, I don't think for most artists the primary focus is making money. Not like just in my own experience,
Mm-hmm.
it's making the money you deserve. Like I think that's the difference. Like where artists have seen other people capture value that they create, and so now it's just about, okay, we want to capture this value as well. So that I think that's the nuance there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I don't necessarily think that music has gotten worse. It's just so much more music
Yeah.
that is more bad music,
Yeah,
and
I was
and,
tend
gonna
to
it's,
be.
and,
I was
and the
gonna
good
say it
music
seems
is
like
harder and harder to sift through.
Right.
And
right.
you know what I'm
I was gonna
saying?
say it seems like one of the biggest pros for like having the labels around at some point was they were sort of like curators of like the good music I get. Like they were out there, the A&Rs, like finding the good artists, giving them all the resources and then putting it out into the world. And people were like, well, hey, like if they're backing up this artist, they must be good. And then boom, you have this person blow up because they have the stage and the distribution and the platform. But now with it being kind of like, well, the labels are, not paying the artists well enough. So like, let's just go in indie and like, let's do it ourselves and all this kind of stuff. And there's just so much out there, with, the ease and accessibility of getting into a studio and making an album or like having the resources to make a quality song. Do you think that it really, like, how do you see the curation aspect working, because it seems like that is really one of the biggest opportunities there, right?
You made such an amazing observation that most people take for granted, and like this this is what labels were incredibly good at, And you still have some people around, today at the labels that are great at developing talent. And I get into a debate with a lot of my friends in tech and even sometimes within my own company about data versus gut. And when you look at careers of people like, Jimmy Iovine, who founded Interscope Records, Jimmy discovered, Eminem. He did, everybody, No Doubt, Gaga, like you two, like a bunch of different acts, that had gone through Interscope. You got people like Clive Davis who did Whitney Houston to Alicia Keys to a ton of different acts. You have people who are so incredibly gifted at artist development and making stars, that people took the skill level of it for granted over the years. And so now it's moved to this thing where everybody's looking at data of artists that might be bubbling on SoundCloud or YouTube or independent on Spotify, and they see a single jump up, or they might be hot on TikTok, and then every record label's trying to sign them. But those acts, it goes into that 10,000 hours thing. It's like you got to do a lot of shows to perform like Lady Gaga or Beyonce. It was a lot of club dates before you went into those arenas. So not skipping a step. You not baking a cake in a microwave. And it's like it's the difference between a really fine cuisine or home cooked meal and going to Denny's. And everybody's at Denny's right now. So it's like, so when you get a Billie
Everyone's
Eilish,
gonna get a stomach ache.
exactly, but they're House of Pancakes right now. Like people are cooking Rudy Tooty Fresh and Fruities. It's like, but you got guys like John Janik at Interscope who came in after Jimmy Iovine. He's given us Olivia Rodrigo and Billie Eilish, and like he is investing in time to really develop stars and songwriters and even down Atlantic Records with Julie and Greenwald and Craig Cowman, with Bruno Mars and Ed Sheeran and Lizzo, and like they're investing in it. But it's like then you got this crowded industry that's just treating art like it's an assembly line, and that's why we're getting this reaction that music sucks right now.
Yeah. But see, to that point, it sounds like what you're saying is like obviously there's a lot of positives that the sort of traditional record label model brings, which is developing talent. But then you have the other side, which is like the talent wants to own as much piece of their music as they can, and like, maybe go the independent route or what have you. Like, how do you see that all playing out? I mean, do you see like labels just kind of shifting with the times but staying around and staying very prominent in the space, or because with all these like new technologies coming out that's giving like artists more ability to distribute themselves and that kind of stuff, what do you think happens to that model?
Yeah, I think the record labels have big catalogs, and the catalogs are becoming more valuable as we see. And I think the answer becomes somewhere in the middle of your question. So where record labels can be valuable, and they should be rewarded for taking a bet on a new artist. So when nobody believes, record labels are stepping up and they're saying we're going to spend millions of dollars on investing in this artist, and most of the time we're going to lose money because it's almost like venture, right? And so you got to have the big superstars that sort of pay for these this portfolio of losses. But when the big superstars win and you make a windfall, I think that the financial dynamics should shift at that point. So it's like, okay, instead of it being an 80-20 deal, okay, does it then become 50-50? Does it then become 70-30 in the artist's favor? Does it then become 80 to the artist, 20 to the label, and and that becomes the arrangement, and then you have the rights to that project revert to that artist over a set period of time. Like, to me, that can be a standard model that just
Yeah.
exists across the industry versus artists get paid. They invest $1 million. Artists they have to pay all of that money back. By the way, so this isn't them buying rights.
Right.
This
In
is
advance.
essentially a
Yeah.
loan. So they got to
Right.
pay all of that back, and then they're on a 20% royalty, and the label's getting 80% once it's paid. Once it's paid back.
That sounds like my real estate deal model, where like you're essentially making a percentage, or based on the percentage of the return, you make a higher amount. So like
Yes,
you're
it's a
even more
waterfall.
incentivized as the artist to ensure your own success, right?
Yes.
And then same for the labels. Like, I mean, it would be a mutually beneficial situation, because the better they do, the better everybody does. In
Yep.
this case, it's just one sided, or at least historically it was more one sided.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's just it's a long history between, you rarely hear an artist say, "I love my record label."
Yeah.
It's very rare,
Hmm.
and that's it's because the way the system is designed. I think is a new generation of independent labels that are out there, that are looking at models totally different, that are looking at partnerships with the artists and like real profit sharing and aligned incentives that hopefully will sort of change the model, and but they got to become successful so that people could point to those case studies.
Hmm. So what's next for Q&A and Venice Music Collective? Like, what is kind of the sort of near term vision of what you hope to accomplish, like in terms of what success looks like?
A lot of what we've been focused on is redefining what it means to be independent. And so, we like what I loved about the Web3 space, that like the most attractive thing was this idea around community. And that to me is when like my light bulb went off in terms of like what best practices can we sort of steal from this space. And so we've been focused around, like with Venice, our primarily we do music distribution, which is getting music from people's computers essentially to all of the global DSPs. And then we have a services division that sort of helps independent artists with digital marketing strategy, playlisting, all of those things. But the most exciting piece to me is the community that's coming together, because it's like it's not just artists that are part of that community. It's music producers, it's videographers, it's managers, it's people who are trying to figure out how to be in the music industry. One of the hardest things in the beginning is just starting your career, is network. So, having this community kind of serves as its own network. So when you got people in our Discord that are trying to figure out, oh, I'm looking for a manager, like what questions should I be asking? Or can I get feedback on these beats or whatever that I just did? And you start to see this sort of collaboration and conversation. To me, that's the core of the spirit of Venice. So when we look at it, we're looking at it through sort of tools, knowledge, and network. So those are the sort of three pillars that we sit on.
Troy, I'm sure we can keep this conversation going forever, but we want to obviously respect your time. And I mean, your story is, I mean, I think it's beyond inspirational, from where you came and your mindset. And I loved it from the get go when you talk about, thoughts become things. And I think that, had you not embraced that early on, a lot of these things would not have happened. And I think that that applies for a lot of people's lives is, and I know it's cliche, but like, if you can dream it, you can achieve it type thing, right? If you can visualize your life in a certain way, even if you don't get there, I think you'll get pretty damn close. And I
But
think
it's
that,
scary. People, like the disappointment of
yeah,
something not happening for people. people don't, you don't want to dream because you don't want to be disappointed.
Right,
Like
right,
that's what happens to most people.
right.
That's what happens. And it's like the I also people, and this is what, like, for especially with kids, and like I'm so conscious of this with my own kids. Is like people will project their failures on you. So it's
Right.
like, and sometimes it could just be the look of on somebody's face when you tell them an idea, or verbal feedback they may give you, or body language they may give you, that make, because like these ideas are they're almost like they're being fertilized. So when you say an idea, and that idea is not fully formed, and somebody kills it with energy, it goes away at that point. So a lot of stuff I keep to myself, because I got to protect it until it gets to a certain point where it can live.
Hmm.
So it's like we just got to be careful with our own words with people, and we got to constantly feed ourselves with sometimes it sounds like delusion, but we got to constantly feed ourselves with the delusion of success.
Right. And I think to that point, Troy, I think at times others that are, discouraging, or they use their own bad experiences and they project it on you. I don't think they necessarily mean, so they're not trying to be mean, or they're not trying to discourage purposely. They just haven't had the idea to, in your words, fertilize a thought further and really obsess about it and really try to make it come true. And I really do think that it is hard. It is hard to make ideas come to life. It is hard to convince people to do things. Like even at my work, like there's times that I think my ideas are amazing, but I'm a young guy going up against people that have reached a level of success and comfort, and it takes time for them to keep saying, okay, this kid's getting annoying, but then they'll realize, oh shit, maybe he's onto something. But you just got to keep doing it, right? Like, and it's easier said than done, but the reality is that it's hard, right? There's not a lot of people that end up on podcasts like this or have success stories because they just stopped, or they just didn't, they just gave up. It's the ones that ended up, keep
I'm glad.
on
I'm
going on.
glad the world. I'm glad the world got to see the Kanye documentary on Netflix. Um, I was around for a lot of that, and I know Kanye pretty well. And Ye came into my office. This is when I was working with John Legend. Ye executive. People don't know Ye discovered John Legend, and Ye actually gave him the name Legend. He's John Stevens before. And so when I started working with John, we were able to get Kanye to come back and collaborate with John on a project. And Kanye came into my office and he whipped out this piece of paper, and I called it the unorg chart. And it was all of his stuff on this paper, and he's walking me through how he was going to go into these areas, and he's explaining his vision for fashion and shoes and all of these things. At that time, it was like he had literally bought sewing machines and invested his entire publishing advance into hiring people. He had moved to Italy to and was in like working out of a warehouse, and like all of these things or whatever. And everything that Kanye told me he was going to do, he pretty much did it. Pretty much did it. And when you look at people like Kanye, who people, Kanye is who he is, and people think he's off
Eccentric.
off the charts or whatever. But the guy is a genius, and he's willing to put in the work, and he's willing to drive a Mack truck through a cul-de-sac to get it done. You look at a guy like Elon Musk, who put so much skin in the game, and had to take out loans, while he was trying to build like Tesla. You know what I'm saying? Like you think about a guy who made a fortune at PayPal, who sort of bet his life on building electric cars when electric cars were failing, and even down to like God, like Gaga, her vision of what she was going to do. People thought she was crazy. And so that to me is like, that's more of reality in my mind than getting up every day, doing something that kills your soul. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
because I see it both ways. I see that, people's thoughts become things when they become unhappy at their job, and that becomes their life. And I see it when people's wildest dreams become our biggest inspirations.
100%. Think good thoughts, manifest it. Troy, can't thank you enough. Just being here and just sharing and being so open about your story and all the sort of wisdom you've accumulated, throughout your incredible career. And I'm sure there's a lot yet to be done work wise. So excited to see what comes next, for you and all the projects you're involved with. But this has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Send me good vibes for Venice.
Always.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Troy.